Now, more than half of those with Alzheimer's will wander away and get lost. It can happen from their home or even when they are behind the wheel. Our next story shows us why a program called Safe Return is making the difference between life and death for some of those loved ones.
One day my mom had asked him to get a battery for her watch. So he went, he was supposed to go to Coral Square Mall, and he ended up just driving, and it was several hours later and she hadn't heard from him. We were all scared because we didn't know where he was and we had no way to reach him. We were afraid. We didn't know what had happened. We started calling the radio stations. The only one that would even put anything out, and they did it right away, was WIRK.
She gave us very specific pieces of information where we could go on the air and tell people, this is his name, this is what he was wearing, this is what his car he's driving. The car was kind of unusual in itself, and this was his last known location.
My dad had a very souped up car at the time. He had a car that had a huge red stripe down the side of it. So they put it on the air. Within like maybe 15 minutes, somebody had called and they had spotted my dad driving on Military Trail.
The next couple of calls we have were from people who saw a car like that close to that area, but not exactly in that area because he would have moved by then. And this continued for probably about an hour and a half.
And we got a call from the Alzheimer's Association from a lady there who was very helpful.
Well, my boss actually contacted the helpline to see if the gentleman was registered. She called the radio station, found the daughter's number, got in contact with the daughter, and then put out an APB or search for the gentleman.
Unbeknownst to us, between 9:30 and 10, a young woman who was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital had spotted him and pulled over, got his attention, and then called the authorities and waited for them to get there.
He thought he had only been gone for like an hour. And I said, Dad, you left yesterday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's now almost noon. And I said, what were you doing, you know? And he said, well, I'm just trying to find where I was going.
The most crucial time is the first 36 hours to find the patient and connect them with their families.
Just them putting it out is what found him.
Safe Return is something that we utilize to keep the patient and the caregiver together and safe in case one becomes wandering.
The girl from the Alzheimer Association started talking to me about the Safe Return bracelet.
Hey, let's face it, any one of us might be dealing with this situation at some point in time in our lives.
Safe Return. To sign up, 1-888-572-8655. Helping a person with dementia. Identify yourself. Maintain good eye contact. Speak slowly and calmly. Use short, simple words. Ask one question at a time. Maintain a calm environment. Avoid confrontation.
Now, at this time, researchers know Alzheimer's gets worse over time and it is fatal. But while those are simple medical facts for most doctors, it is much more personal for the mother and the young physician you are about to meet. Lorna Pearson comes home from a long day of work to check on her husband, who most of the time doesn't even remember who she is.
How was your day? All right. Are you having lunch?
At the age of 59, Elmsley Pearson had subtle personality changes, and his daughter says he couldn't remember simple things like directions.
He'd be gone for hours on end. Where'd you go? Oh, I just went down the street, but he was gone for 2 hours. So there were subtle signs.
He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and now, 7 years later, he has to have assistance with even the basics, like eating his meals.
We went from feeding ourselves with a knife and fork to feeding ourselves with just a fork to feeding ourselves with just a spoon to now not feeding ourselves at all. So everything has been gradual.
It is so difficult for his wife Lorna to deal with, she doesn't like to talk about it. But her daughter is a medical doctor and wasn't surprised when they found out the news.
I said, you know, his memory, something seems to be wrong. You'd ask him a question, he'd repeat the question, or he'd be 2 steps behind in a conversation. And that's kind of where it started, and I suspected it from the beginning.
Soon after, Dr. Pearson left her residency in New York and moved home to Royal Palm Beach. And between her, her mom, and her aunt, they are in charge of every aspect of Elmsley's life.
He has never been a wanderer, so he would stay here by himself. He would watch TV. My aunt lives a few doors down. She would come and check on him. We would leave him lunch because he could prepare his own meals, and then now, slowly, he could stop preparing his meals, so she would come down and stay with him. So we went from her checking on him to her actually coming to stay with him. And then we actually started with the Alzheimer's Association and got him into daycare.
When he's not in daycare, the days consist of watching TV and moments of attempted communication with his family.
I think the hardest part with him is communication, just not being able to communicate with someone when you're trying to say, get up. It's simple things. He doesn't understand anything at this point, so that's been the toughest part.
That's her name? Her name is Lorna. You remember Lorna?
And there is even greater struggles for a wife that grew up in a culture where the man takes care of everything.
It's been a long time for her to accept that he really is not going to get better, it's going to get worse, and that her husband, as she knew him to be, no longer exists and will not exist that way again.
So for this family of caregivers, like thousands in Palm Beach County, life is nothing that was expected or planned for. Both women work full-time, and their jobs don't stop when they come home.
There are days where, you know, enough is enough and I have to take over, and it's the same thing for me. Some days you're trying to get him to do something, he won't do it, and it's better for her, he'll do it for her. So he has his days between the two of us. So yeah, it helps that we're both here together in this situation.
Dr. Pearson says despite the long days and nights and sometimes overwhelming struggles of taking care of a father with Alzheimer's, she just remembers the kind of dad he once was.
Family is important in this particular instance. That's why everybody rallies around him, because he was a wonderful person. I mean, he still is physically. Mentally, he's a totally different person, but that's why he has so much support around him now.
You know who I am?
Now, the stories you've seen here tonight only give us a small glimpse into what it is really like to be a caregiver. But do know, if you are facing this yourself, there is help, and a lot of it. There are resources available, and getting help is literally a phone call or click away. In a moment, we will show you the helpline once again. And remember, don't miss our special on April 30th. You can call in or email your questions at that time to our panel of experts, doctors, and those in the community who can guide you to the right help. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.